This is the Breaker.news podcast for the week of January 12th, 2025. I'm Bob Mackin, publisher of theBreaker.news and host of the Breaker.news podcast. Welcome to edition number 378. The Breaker is your source for news, opinion, and analysis about British Columbia issues, institutions, and influencers. Later, I'll tell you how you can support The Breaker. On this edition, headlines from the Pacific Rim and the Pacific Northwest. I award a virtual Nanaimo bar to a difference maker. And on the Big Deal feature, Canada made headlines around the world on January the 6th when Justin Trudeau announced he would quit as Prime Minister. Joining me to talk about one of the most unpopular politicians in Canadian history, Research Co-President Mario Canseco and Timothy Renshaw, publisher of the Substack Shipping News. What next for Canada, politically and economically? This is the Big Deal feature on the Breaker.news podcast.
Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
It's the beginning of the end of Justin Trudeau. The election year is now underway with the resignation speech by Canada's 23rd Prime Minister on January 6th, with questions from press gallery reporters. He ended months of speculation as his party has plummeted in public opinion polls. Justin Trudeau announced in a hastily called news conference that he would prorogue Parliament until March 24th and step down as the Prime Minister of Canada once a new Liberal Party leader is chosen. Now, the day began by the Rideau Cottage porch after the Ottawa wind swept away some of Trudeau's speaking notes. It was not as surprising or dramatic as February 29th, 1984. That was when his father, Pierre Trudeau, famously announced that he was resigning as the 15th Prime Minister of Canada after he walked in the snow in Ottawa. This time, the January 6th announcement came coincidentally on the same day that the U.S. Congress certified Donald Trump's presidential win. Unlike 2021, however, January 6, 2025 was more exciting in Ottawa than Washington, D.C. Now, Trump has threatened tariffs on Canadian goods entering the U.S. He'll return to power in the Oval Office on January 20th, and he had things to say as well on his Truth Social platform, continuing to threaten tariffs, continuing about his 51st State of America theme about Canada. I think he's serious about tariffs. So we hope he's not serious about the 51st state. But to join me to talk about all of this on this momentous day in Canadian history, Canadian political history, is Mario Canseco, president of Research Co. and repeat guest here on the Breaker.news podcast. Now, Mario, what is your reaction to this announcement on the first Monday of 2025 that Justin Trudeau has finally seen the writing on the wall that he cannot get reelected?
We were in field over the weekend, Bob, and the numbers were dismal for the Liberal Party. 21% level of support across the country. The Conservatives leading in every region and province, with the exception of Quebec, where the Bloc was in first place, and the Liberals were a distant third. So certainly a situation where a lot of the things that we were told were going to happen were not materializing. We have no gender gap. The level of support for the Conservatives is the same among men and women. There was no significant rebound with middle-aged Canadians. We have a majority who say that they're voting for the Conservatives. And when we pose the question of a merged Liberal and NDP party in the next federal election, the numbers don't look good, either with Justin Trudeau as leader or Jagmeet Singh as leader. So it was just a matter of time before they realized that unless something drastic happens and they try to reconnect with Canadians in the next 90 days, it's going to be very difficult for the Liberals to hold on to power.
What were the key takeaways of the events of January the 6th, 2025, of Justin Trudeau's rushed announcement at Rideau Cottage to say that he was resigning? What are the key takeaways? Was there any surprise to you?
Well, there's a couple of things that were quite surprising. I think the discussion about Chrystia Freeland leaving the government left a lot of unanswered questions. This idea of, there are certain conversations that I had with her that I'm going to share with anybody. But also the notion that the regret is to see a situation where they weren't able to change the way in which we elect the House of Commons. And I was one of the people who actually presented to the House of Commons Committee on electoral reform. And I can tell you that the liberals who were present at the time weren't really paying that close attention to this. I think most of us came out of this thinking that it was an exercise in lip service, and it ultimately was because nothing happened. But to look at it this way and to say, maybe this is my one regret that we couldn't do anything like this. And of course, we'll have a discussion about what the legacy of the Trudeau years will be. For some, it'll be the legalization of marijuana. For some, it will be the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which made today's announcement even more ironic. This is the setting in which Justin Trudeau had a significantly higher approval rating discussing with Canadians how to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in April, May, or June of 2020. And here we are 5 years later, and he's announcing from that same venue that he's stepping aside.
Now, this was supposed to be a big year for Justin Trudeau, I guess, in his mind. He is the president of the G7. Canada is hosting the G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta in mid-June. And because of that, the leader of the government of the host country for the G7 becomes the president of the G7. Now, it looks like he may or may not be around for that, depending on how fast the Liberals replace him as leader. If he stays, then he would be the senior member of the G7 for length of service since 2015. If he's gone, actually, Donald Trump would become the de facto longest serving member, although not consecutive, because he was elected before Emmanuel Macron, the French president. So what next for Justin Trudeau here in 2025? What next for the Liberal Party? What do you think we should look at or look for in the coming days, weeks, and the next few months?
Well, we'll have to figure out who is serious about running for the Liberal leadership. There will be a lot of wrangling, a lot of discussions, people making phone calls and trying to figure out where they go from here. History has not been kind to English-speaking leaders of the Liberal Party who supplant a French-speaking leader of the Liberal Party. Lester Pearson was unable to win a majority government in 1964. John Turner was unable to form the government in 1984. And the other example that we have more recent is Paul Martin holding on to a minority government, and then Michael Ignatieff in 2011 not even able to win his own seat. So it's going to be a monumental challenge for whoever becomes leader of the party. I think it's fair to assume that it will not be somebody from Quebec, even if Melanie Joly decides that she wants to run. And it's going to be more about having a national conversation with Canadians. I think the way in which they need to engage, particularly because of the situation with Donald Trump and the level of animosity that might be there for the Conservatives, has to be significantly better than what we've seen in the last few Liberal races, where it has been essentially a small, tightly knit club of people discussing who they want to see as their next head of government.
Is Christy Clark at all a viable challenger? I mean, this is her ambition since the 1990s when she was working as an aide in Liberal cabinet offices in Ottawa before she became a political force in British Columbia. She was telling people on the social scene there that her lifelong dream was to become the prime minister someday, and here this could be her chance to become prime minister. But do you think that she's a viable leader? When do you think that the Ottawa Press Gallery will learn again how to use Google and to look up her history as Premier of British Columbia from 2011 to 2017, which is not a proud history, or look at her history before becoming Premier as a member of Gordon Campbell's cabinet?
Well, there's certainly a lot of baggage that a former Premier will bring into a leadership race. And I think Christy Clark is not immune to something like this. it's going to be more complicated to be appealing in places where they really need to reconnect with people. I don't think they were expecting a couple of years ago to be as low as they are in Quebec. To have the Liberal Party in third place in Quebec requires a significant effort from somebody who knows the place, who has been around, who has talked to people, who has had an opportunity to serve at the federal level and to actually have discussions with people who are important in Quebec. And Christy Clark never had that. So this is going to be complicated for whoever wants to do this and hasn't been in government for a while at the federal level.
As a whole, here we are in a state of chaos, essentially. We've got Donald Trump coming back into the White House, threatening major economic turmoil to Canada with these tariffs. And we have essentially a lame duck prime minister, and we don't know when we will have a stable government again here in Canada. Will it be months, or will it be this time next year after the next election happens in October? Assuming that it stays in October, assuming there's nothing, no other surprise along the way, no court challenge to extend this term of the Liberals. And
Well, I think part of what makes this more complicated than in past situations that are similar is the presence of Donald Trump in the United States. You know, he will take office in the next couple of weeks. There's already been discussions about where he thinks Canada should be as far as the relationship with the United States. Whoever comes in is going to have a very serious conversation and try to figure out how to engage with Canadians on something like this. Whoever becomes the prime minister after being the leader of the Liberal Party is not going to come in with a mandate from voters. And there might be people who are expecting this to be a coronation of Pierre Poilievre once Canadians are able to cast a ballot in the next federal election. But it's really crucial for the next 3 or 5 months to maintain the discussions about where to go and how to deal with the United States. Otherwise, you know, we run the risk of more jokes and more problems and more discussions about Donald Trump. And it's tough to figure out when you can take him seriously or not. But, you know, we never had this type of rhetoric in 2016 or 2017 because Justin Trudeau was seen as a significantly more powerful prime minister than what he is now.
shipping is the biggest economic generator here in British Columbia. Port of Vancouver is Canada's largest and the fourth biggest port by cargo tons in North America, worth a sweet $16 billion in gross domestic product every year. 130,000 people here and across Canada are directly or indirectly employed because of it. It's a major factor on Wall Street, Bay Street, and Main Street. And joining me to talk about this is Timothy Renshaw. He is the former editor of Business in Vancouver and former editor of the North Shore News. He's now publisher of the Substack Shipping News. You can find it at timothyrenshaw.substack.com. Justin Trudeau announced January 6th that he would resign as Prime Minister when the Liberal Party finds a successor. He also said Parliament was prorogued until March 24th. The next day, on January 7th, Timothy Renshaw wrote under this headline, Canada's supply chain confidence sinking with leaky Liberal Party ship. And to carry on with the theme, the country seems right now like it's rudderless. So here we are at the start of 2025. Where are we going in 2025, or are we truly rudderless?
Rudderless is a good term for the shipping profile here, Bob. Where are we going? That is a good question. I think with Justin Trudeau stepping away at this kind of critical time, a lot of people were wondering where we are going and where we need to go. That's a whole different thing. But of course, one of the key things, one of the key timings of this whole thing is that as he's leaving, Donald Trump is coming in, and the leverage he has now without any kind of leadership in Canada as far as trade and shipping, all those kind of things is huge. So, I mean, this is a really, as I say, a real critical time for the country, and not just because of what he's talking about tariff threats and those kind of things. I mean, we have a lot of opportunities that we could take advantage of, but without any kind of national vision as far as trade and supply chains go, we're not going to be able to exploit those opportunities.
Now, Donald Trump truly is the wild card. He's on his way back to the Oval Office after winning the 2024 election. inauguration January 20th. Canada's premiers say that they're going to eventually go down to Washington, D.C. to lobby for Canada's interests. Of course, Donald Trump is threatening the 25% tariffs against Canadian and Mexican goods unless Canada and Mexico up their game when it comes to border security to stem the flow of fentanyl and stem the flow of illegal aliens into the United States. This all happens when the three countries are supposed to be actually working together as a team to plan for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which is coming pretty quickly. Now, Donald Trump says that he doesn't need to buy lumber or dairy from Canada, doesn't need the auto pact anymore, doesn't need a lot of things that Canada says he does need, that Canada says the 300 plus million Americans do need. Trump also suggests that Canada should become the 51st state of America. Is he joking or not?
You never know with Donald. As far as the tariffs go, I mean, there's a lot of questions here as beyond his kind of you know bellicose 25% tariffs. Like, I mean, does he have the legal authority or the political support to implement these tariffs? I mean, I have to remember that. Canada has a trade surplus with the states, but like most of it is to do with resources and energy. And applying a 25% tariff on energy from Canada into the US is going to raise energy prices in the US and cut the margins for refineries, et cetera. I'm not sure that would be a big draw down south, even in, what is a really trumped up US world.
Now, here we are in Canada. The dollar has been suffering in recent weeks and months. The federal and the BC governments do not seem to have a solid economic blueprint. And Canada has been seen as a high tax, high regulation market, volatile labor climate. And there's been strikes and lockouts in the logistics realm, at the ports and in the postal system. It's been a tough few years coming out of the pandemic. Now, you've also written Missing in Action, Canada's national supply chain strategy, troubling trade winds should be accelerating the delivery of a cohesive plan for efficient coast to coast to coast trade corridors in this country. Now, what would be the solution? We hear this pie in the sky talk of some of the politicians about high speed rail would be a way forward, but of course, that is not cheap and not quick to build. Automation is something that you've been exploring. Automation at ports and automation in the logistics industry. China seems to be light years ahead. But where is Canada right now? Where is British Columbia right now? Where do we need to be when it comes to automation?
Well, I think we need to be current with automation. I mean, we have we could talk about the Terminal 2 project that is proposed for Roberts Bank, Delta Port near that area. This is a massive project, but it's not going to be built unless there is at least semi-automation incorporated in it, because it's just not going to be financially viable for whoever's going to operate it. But on the other side of things, you have a lot of opposition from the union side of things opposing automation. Like if you look to the south, the looming strike along East and Gulf Coast ports by the International Longshoremen's Association is really focused on this issue of automation. Now, if you believe what the leaders are saying there, they don't want incorporation of any kind of automation into ports and terminals, which is really would be at the disadvantage of not only the terminals and ports, but also the union's membership, because the jobs in a lot of resource, a lot of industries, a lot of areas is being disrupted incredibly by digitization, automation, AI, everything. And any efficient supply chain connected to the global supply chain has got to be integrated with what is coming now. And a lot of that has to do with control of containers, where they're going, tracking them, and all the deliveries, and getting rid of the paper trail that shipping companies still stick to. And, some of their technology and the way they do things paper-wise goes back 400 years, I mean, and as soon as things get digitized, terminals and ports have to be automated and digitized along with this, or else they're just not going to be able to compete properly. They won't be able to expand business, and they won't be able to add new employees in different careers. Like a lot of the jobs on the waterfront are changing just like everywhere else, and a lot of times it's for the better. They're safer, they're less labor oriented, and they have a lot more interesting things that they're doing.
Yeah, the longshoremen's unions, they're probably the top pay scale when it comes to unionized labor throughout North America. But to play devil's advocate, isn't their reaction natural that here they are worried about their members, that their members being replaced by robots and artificial intelligence? How are we going to get over that hump? How are we going to find ways to retrain those workers to maybe grandfather them in the future and replace them with the automation, find new jobs, keep them whole. They want to stay whole. So how do we balance this, or is there a way?
Well, yeah, I think the balance resides in both sides getting together and working out ways where they can incorporate automation where it makes sense, because it doesn't make sense to automate everything on the ports. Just doesn't, it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not faster or more efficient. So both sides getting together, both sides being educated on what would work best for the whole operation, because it's in within both interests to be able to compete in the global supply chain and port business. So if you look at like there's been automation that's been incorporated in some of the terminals in the Port of Vancouver, like GCT out in Deltaport has a few years ago incorporated a rail densification system that incorporated automation and efficiencies, and helped improve the efficiency of that port by, I think it was between 30 and 50%. But it also helped improve the working conditions of the employees there. So uh, as with most things, there's going to be losses, but there's also going to be gains, if the unions are going to stick to the current model and no change, then they're going to be obsolete, and their terminals and the companies they work for are not going to be able to compete.
And the Port of Vancouver has ranked pretty low on industry standards and efficiency in recent years. How low has that been? And is there going to be improvement in 2025?
Well, we would hope so. Yeah, both. Well, actually, the west coast of North America, most of the ports up and down North American coasts are, near closer to the bottom of ratings for global port efficiencies. So I think Vancouver and Prince Rupert in the last one that was done were down near the bottom of, I think it was 400 major ports that were measured. So, I mean, there's a lot of improvement to be done. I mean, you don't want to be behind ports that are in, third world countries when we have presumably a first world economy.
And when you're talking technology, talking about automation, talking about artificial intelligence to change the way that goods are handled on the ports, you also have to talk about cybersecurity, a very important topic, and you've written about that recently as well.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, especially for shipping, because shipping has so many possible ways that their system can be infiltrated, because there's so many moving parts and so many different companies and different technologies, and the supply chain is very complicated, and it has to work together. but it doesn't always it's not always really interconnected properly. So cybersecurity is, I think, one of the top concerns for shipping companies because the people that are involved in cybercrime are starting to realize how expensive it is to derail like a massive company like Maersk, even for a couple of days, how many millions of dollars are involved in what could be like a very rich ransomware target. So, yeah, cybersecurity is really coming to, as I say, the top priority list for not just ocean carriers, but all up and down the supply chain, because any access in the supply chain to all of the digitization affects, not just the company that's targeted by the ransomware people.
My guest, Timothy Renshaw, who publishes the Substack Shipping News. That's at timothyrenshaw.substack.com. Go there for the latest on shipping news in British Columbia and elsewhere.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, shipping is everybody. I don't know if everybody knows, but everything comes through shipping, and it's a real impact on your cost of living and inflation and all those things. So it's an interesting area and critically important.
Now it's time on the Breaker.news podcast for Around the Rim. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Rim. In Focus Taiwan.tw, political party head, ex-military officers indicted in China espionage case. Taichung prosecutors on January 8th announced the indictment of 7 suspects, including the head of a small political party, for allegedly receiving money to photograph and pass along the GPS coordinates of Taiwanese military installations to contacts in China. The Taichung District Prosecutor's Office said it indicted the chief suspect, Fukang Alliance Party Chairman Chu Huanghui, and 6 retired military officers in August under the Anti-Infiltration Act and National Security Act. In Yonhap News Agency, Seoul court again denies arrest warrant for shaman with alleged ties to Yoon. Shaman Jun Song-bae is suspected of receiving about $70,000 in illegal political funds from a candidate during the ruling party's nomination race for the 2018 local elections. He is believed to have played a role in Yoon's presidential campaign prior to the election in March 2022 and has been accused of leveraging his personal connections with the First family to influence business interests. In the Pasadena Star News, how a rare windstorm whipped up LA County's catastrophic hellscape. Southern California had back-to-back extremely wet years in 2023 and 2024, with annual rainfall reaching as high as 43 inches in the Pasadena area and 26 inches in Santa Monica. That spurred the growth of chaparral shrubs and grass. Then came a record dry and warm start to winter. A low-pressure system pushed the region's typical Santa Ana northerly winds to a higher elevation than usual, causing the winds to jump the basin's mountains and descend to speeds of 80 to 100 miles per hour into more widespread areas, affecting communities such as Pasadena that are typically protected from the strongest of seasonal gusts. All that according to Mike Wofford, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service. That's Around the Rim on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast. Now it's time on the Breaker.news podcast for Cascadia Calling. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Northwest. In Willamette Week, Oregon's new electric truck rule is disrupting Oregon's transportation industry. The nation's largest heavy truck manufacturer is headquartered in Portland, but has halted sales of the vehicles in Oregon. In 2025, Oregon's government mandates 7% of all heavy trucks sold to be electric. The requirement will be 40% by 2032. Daimler, through its Freightliner and Western Star brands, is one of Oregon's largest manufacturers and employs 3,000 people. In Crosscut, poll: Washington voters want 2025 legislature to focus on their pocketbooks. For the 4th year in a row, residents said the economy was their top issue for the upcoming session, according to the newest Cascade PBS Elway poll. Voters are also concerned about public safety and taxes, which tied for second among poll respondents with 18% each. Homelessness was third on the voter priority list, with 14% of respondents citing it as a top issue. And check out theBreaker.news and bobmackin.substack.com for the stories behind these headlines. The beginning of the end of Justin Trudeau, and demo instead of reno means one less Vancouver hotel for 2026 World Cup. Read the stories behind the headlines, go to theBreaker.news and bobmackin.substack.com. That's Cascadia calling on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast.
Don't matter what color you are, 'cause love will conquer hate, so you won't stand alone, you won't stand alone.
The Virtual Nanaimo Bar, brought to you by Spruce Hill Contracting. Every week we end the Breaker.news podcast on a tasty note by awarding the goodness of a virtual Nanaimo bar to people making a difference. A virtual version of the province's favorite dessert bar goes this week to the Vancouver Police and West Vancouver Police officers who saved an injured bald eagle on the Lionsgate Bridge on January 4th. They also arrested a man who said he wanted to eat the raptor. The eagle is now receiving care from the Orphaned Wildlife Rehabilitation Society in Delta. And you can nominate someone for a virtual Nanaimo bar. Send me an email to bob@theBreaker.news. That's it for the Breaker.news podcast for the week of January 12th, 2025. I'm Bob Mackin. Thanks for joining me. Did you know that on the 12th of January in 1971, anti-war activists known as the Harrisburg Seven were charged with a 1970 conspiracy to kidnap Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and bomb steam tunnels in the Capitol. The jury couldn't decide on the guilt of the mostly Catholic priests and nuns after a 1972 trial, so the defendants were freed. Now you know. Send me your feedback, send me your story ideas to bob@theBreaker.news. Bookmark theBreaker.news. You can also find us at theBreaker.ca. And introducing bobmackin.substack.com. Visit me there too. Sign up for the free email newsletter and get updates to your inbox, or follow The Breaker News as news happens on X, formerly Twitter. And you can support The Breaker for as little as $7 a month. For more information, go to bobmackin.substack.com. Until next week.